Yo, welcome to the Stokastic.com NFL Strategy Show Ownership Edition. This is one of the more fun shows every week because we get our first run of ownership projections. We got the top stack tool updated over at Stokastic, 3 days free for any of you guys that want to try it. Links in the description. We'll throw it in chat as well. No strings attached. Don't have to do anything outside of click that link, and you're in all tools for the first 3 days. But anyway, I'm Dave Loughran at Loughy_D, LOUGHY_D on the Twitter, joined by Neil Orfield at Player Q DFS, talking 13 games. And you and I discussed this before the show. Ben and I talked about it yesterday before we actually had ownership, more so just speculation. Not a ton of chalky players in the sense that we've seen before where you're getting like 30, even 25% player guys this week.
Yeah, I'm a little bit surprised to see how low ownership is, but at the same time, there are no players that I look at and I would expect them to be like 40% owned this week. So I guess it's not the biggest surprise, but I always hope that there will be, some huge performances for people to overreact to in these early weeks. And I guess the huge performances that we had this week in general were guys that are have pretty big price tags anyway. So we don't have any major misprices or anything. Yeah, not quite the ownership edge that I hope for early in the season, but we can still try and find some edges here and there.
How you doing today, man?
I'm doing all right. Didn't enjoy that Monday Night Football game. It was I enjoyed covering it with you. It was fun to talk about, and then watching it, not so much fun. How you doing?
It's Quez, man. It was a Quez day, huh?
Yeah, it was a Quez day. That was one of the things that I wouldn't say that I got it right because I'm not in the business of making predictions about who's going to play well necessarily. It's more about like how do they look relative to their ownership and stuff. So I liked Quez. I was on Quez, so that went well for us. But overall, didn't end up making money. It came down to the very last play of that game. I still had a shot at making pretty huge money. I had a lot of outs there, and then of course the sack ended it, and that was kind of a bummer for me.
Yeah, and Cousins just continuously getting picked as well. So
yep, and he was yeah. He
also,
looked pretty bad.
Go Birds.
Yeah.
For a moment there, I thought you were talking about DFS, but it sounds like you were also talking about just pure heartbreak.
I was just, wrapping it all into one. There was heartbreak for the Vikings. There was heartbreak for my DFS teams. I mean, by the end of the game, I already knew I wasn't going to be the Vikings.
You're just trying to win some money at that point.
Yeah. So at that point, I don't care. I would have preferred an Eagles pick six. That was one of my outs, was an Eagles pick six or a strip sack and a fumble recovery for the Eagles, something like that on the final play. I think would have gotten me there in the Eagles Vikings showdown. I'm not actually positive about that. I either would have been first or second, tied for second, but didn't go my way.
I actually prefer if the team that I root for is going to lose, I actually prefer the game not to be close from the beginning because then I can just sweat DFS or any other props or whatever I have. Because if it's one that's coming down to the wire and your team loses on the final drive of the game and you don't do, and it has negative DFS,
all the heartbreak at once. Yeah.
Oh, dude, it's just a hurricane of shit. So, I'd say, look, Vikings, Kirk Cousins, primetime. Irv Smith dropped a long touchdown. Slay really locked Jefferson up, though, which was the interesting thing.
Yeah, that was must be fun for Eagles fans to see Slay locking up Jefferson. I wonder about that Irv Smith drop. It's like, how much does that change the game if he just makes that catch, scores the touchdown? Suddenly Kirk Cousins is playing with a little bit more confidence. I mean, you can't quantify that kind of thing, but I think it makes a difference if he catches that long ball on a perfectly thrown pass. Yep. I feel like Kirk Cousins is playing with a little bit more confidence in himself, in his receivers. It changes everything for the offense, I think, but it's really, really hard to quantify that kind of thing.
Yeah, definitely possible. I will say though, at the same time, like they blocked the field goal and then promptly turned it back over. So there were a lot of chances there. They squandered many of them, but they got the Lions this week. We transition
at home.
Transition into this week 3. This is going to be a fun topic of conversation for Sunday slate because I have zero idea what to make of the Vikings right now. Honest assessment of them, they should have beat Green Bay, who was down 2 of 5 starting linemen and then 3 of 5 after Runyon went down with the concussion. Didn't have Allen Lazard. Of course, they did a good job containing the running backs in Jones and Dillon, but it was a beat up Packers team specifically on the line. And then they beat them. I'm not taking that away from them. They handily beat them, but then they came in and got stomped by Philly at the Link, no less. or granted, I should say. But now you've got the Lions who have played really well. This game does have like insane shootout potential written all over it. And as indicated by the total on this one as well, which is sitting at like 52.5 last time I looked.
Yeah. So I also agree with you that we don't know what to make of the Vikings. And yes, they should have won that game against Green Bay. Christian Watson also had a big drop in that game. That would have been an easy touchdown for Green Bay. At the same time, I don't take much from the Vikings losing to the Eagles at home, because I think the Eagles are really good this year and it's going to be hard for anybody to beat them at home. So I agree with you. Like we really don't know what to make of the Vikings this year, but I think that the offense is going to be good. Like I think they said all offseason they're planning on throwing it more this year. And I think that the passing game in particular, I'm very high on the Vikings passing game this season, and obviously in a matchup with the Lions. I'm struggling with my I know we're trying to get to the slate, but my survivor decision. I have 2 teams remaining. I entered 5 into a huge contest, and I was thinking, the Vikings and maybe the Chargers, and now it's like, man, I'm not that confident in the Vikings. Against the Lions are looking better than expected. The Chargers might be without Justin Herbert or with a banged up Justin Herbert. It's just it's a tough week this week.
It is, and the Jags defense doesn't look all that bad either.
I know. Yeah, it's. I mean, if the Chargers have Justin Herbert, I'm still going to have some confidence in the Chargers to be able to score on that Jags defense. But without Justin Herbert, I'm definitely not taking the Chargers this week.
You're right, though. It's kind of tough. I think, and then, have you gone Chiefs yet? It would suck to burn that.
No. Yeah, I usually save the good teams. We're getting to the point where maybe I'll have to use a couple of them, but
I feel like the Bengals have to win this week, but could you imagine?
It's only a 5-point spread.
0-3.
I know.
Brutal. That offensive line was supposed to improve dramatically, and it's only gotten dramatically worse. So, we're going to talk about all that because Jamar Chase is one of those guys at the top tier of pricing that's getting far less ownership than everyone else. But let's kick it off, Neil. We got running backs to talk about. This is what we do here on the Ownership Show. If you're new, welcome. I'll give you the rundown. But first, hit that thumbs up. You haven't done so. We got I'm going to hit it right now. 43 thumbs up. Atoning for my own sins over here. But atone for yours if you haven't done so yet. Let's rip this up over 100. And if you haven't done so, subscribe to the channel. Helps us greatly. Plus, you get to know when all of our content goes live. It's a nice thing to have. And if you want to hit that join down below, get the free super chats each month, the custom emojis, the sweet badges as you see all over there in chat, and some other stuff. Like we got a survivor pool going for all of our members and some more as well. But we'll go running backs, wide receivers, tight ends. And the reason we go stacks at the end is because that's when we can really get into the mindset of how do we approach these stacks. And then the quarterbacks fall into that. The quarterbacks fall into wide receivers and tight ends too. So we don't need to specifically highlight them at the top for anyone that's thinking maybe we screwed this up. We did it. I've done this before, Neil. All right, let's talk running backs. Running back position. Chalk, and this is arbitrary. We're just talking about guys that are right now kind of higher owned in the double digits. Neil pointed it out earlier. Nothing crazy. David Montgomery, Fournette, Dalvin Cook, Jacobs, Mixon, Taylor are all up there. And quite frankly, based on volume or matchups alone, I do like all of these guys this week.
I know. And I hate that how much I like all of them.
I know.
Just look at
because they're not that expensive.
If you sort by like optimal percentage or boom percentage, it's the same players at the top. Like there's no big discrepancy in people making mistakes based on our simulations. These guys all look like they're owned right about where they should be. We've got Leonard Fournette coming in at 15.5% projected ownership, 14.4% chance of booming, 19% chance of being optimal. He's right in the middle of that range. David Montgomery against the Texans, 15.6% projected ownership, optimal 16.5% of the time. Dalvin Cook, same. I mean, all these guys, it's like they're owned right about where they should be. So it's a little bit hard to say like, oh, the field is getting this right, the field is getting this wrong. But as you said, I like all of these guys. I mean, David Montgomery at 5,900 in a matchup with the Texans. I was a little bit worried about the split with Khalil Herbert, but so far hasn't been a huge issue. In week 2, Montgomery had 33 snaps to Khalil Herbert's 8. My bigger concern being that can the Bears score? Can the Bears move the ball at all? Is my biggest concern with David Montgomery. But at 5,900, I'm willing to take some shots there. Do you have a favorite among these guys?
So one really encouraging thing about Montgomery for me that kind of, in my opinion, I won't say it dispels any of those concerns, I won't say that it's going to completely tamp down every concern that I have about Montgomery, because you're 100% right. This offense is dog shit, right? But at the same time, Montgomery still racked up 122 rushing yards against that Green Bay team last week that knew Justin Fields couldn't throw the football, right? So, and they were playing from behind throughout the entirety of that game. It was never competitive. And he still had 17 total touches, 17 looks. Against San Francisco, granted, bit of an outlier game, bad weather, but still 21 looks, 20 touches. I like Khalil Herbert as a backup, but I think you're still in a game like this where neither offense is even remotely competent. I think you're definitely staring down the barrel of a very, very potential 20 plus touch game for Montgomery. So that's why I like him. I think we have a lot of upside in touches here. And he was actually very efficient in a game where he probably shouldn't have been. Another reason, though, that I like a lot of these guys up top, and you talked about some of them, Leonard Fournette has not been productive in terms of efficiency to start the season. The Dallas Cowboys did a decent job containing him, and then they didn't really need to use him that late in the game, especially after Dak went out. And they always struggle against the Saints. They couldn't get anything going. Nevertheless, he still has 45 carries on the season, Neil. 45 carries, which is second only to Joe Mixon, who has 46, even though that team has been terrible as well. And Leonard Fournette is second in touches with 49 in the league compared to only Mixon with 56. All these guys might not be great in terms of production so far, but all of them are getting a massive, massive workload with much better matchups in week 3.
Yeah, the Packers 30th in rush DVOA per Football Outsiders. Packers, one of the worst rush defenses in the league so far. So love that for Leonard Fournette. Similarly, Houston 25th in rush DVOA. So David Montgomery in a great matchup. It surprised me. Dalvin Cook actually has the worst matchup of the three, but still Detroit 23rd in rush DVOA so far this year. So all of these guys in great matchups, they're getting the volume. Actually, Dalvin Cook did not get a ton of volume last week, but I can't imagine that's going to stick throughout the year. Obviously, they want to use Dalvin Cook. So I think all of these guys, I mean, these are the top 3 on the board for me. And I think it makes sense that people want to play them. I think they're all the top running backs we have this week. I'm
with you. All of them are very appealing. Even with how bad that offensive line has been for the Bengals. I mean, Football Outsiders has them dead last in adjusted line yards with 2.9. It is bad, right? It is bad. They've been bad as second level yards. You name it. Like, just go down the list over at Football Outsiders. It's bad, but Mixon's getting so much work that I don't know if it matters. Josh Jacobs. Would you be surprised if this was a 20 touch game for Josh Jacobs either?
No, I mean, I think that Josh Jacobs always has that upside for a big game. Great matchup with the Titans. They're projected to win the game. Actually, let me double check where Tennessee. Tennessee is 26th in rush DVOA. So my priors hold up. Great matchup for Josh Jacobs as well. Joe Mixon, we do have, he's one of the players that looks over-owned in our tools, but you get why he's getting so much ownership in this matchup with the Jets. They're expected to win. They could put up points early and then just be kind of running the game out. But Joe Mixon projected for 13.9% ownership, 5.8% chance of booming, 8.2% chance of being optimal. His price tag is just a little bit more than some of these other guys we're talking about. So, Joe Mixon, if you're fading one of these guys who I like, they make sense to me. I think Joe Mixon would be one that I would consider fading in favor of some of these other players. But yeah, Josh Jacobs, 14.1% ownership, coming in optimal 15.5% of the time at 5,400. Looks good as well.
Last one up here towards the top, Jonathan Taylor. Terrible game last time out. Not his fault. 9 for 54. They only gave him 5 carries in the first half. They got obliterated. They got blanked by the Jaguars 24-0. You would think that after last year in week 18, where they needed a win and Carson Wentz was thoroughly embarrassed along with this whole team, offensive line, and arguably the city as well. Sorry, Steve Buzzard. That they would have came in and been at least semi-competitive. Even without Michael Pittman, you'd think they'd lean on Jonathan Taylor. 10 touches in that game, but 31 in an overtime game the week prior to that. If they don't get Jonathan Taylor back to 20 plus touches again this week, it's going to be anarchy in Indianapolis.
I mean, can they even move the ball? That's what we're asking ourselves these days. They did not look good at all last week. Kansas City is 6th in rush DVOA, so that I guess would be a point against Jonathan Taylor, and 22nd in pass DVOA. So sort of a pass funnel for Kansas City. But yeah, you would think the Colts will want to run the ball. They're going to want to slow the game down, keep the ball out of Patrick Mahomes' hands. So probably I'm expecting a pretty big workload from Jonathan Taylor, and even against the Chiefs, I think he could put up big numbers. So, Jonathan Taylor any week. And if you can play, if you have 9,000 left over at a running back spot, I think it makes a lot of sense to play Jonathan Taylor. He's not going to be the first guy going into a lot of my lineups. He looks a little bit over-owned in our tools at 11.4% projected ownership, 3.9% chance of booming, 3.5% chance of being optimal. But that's because of the price tag. It's hard to be optimal when you're 9,000. You don't necessarily need to be optimal to win a tournament. Jonathan Taylor still obviously has as big of a chance as any player out there to put up, 40 fantasy points. So anytime you have 9,000 left to play Jonathan Taylor, I think it makes some sense to do so.
Yeah. Ultimately, though, there's just a lot of really good mid-range running backs for sure. And yeah, probably make it easy to get not away from him, but if you didn't want to play Jonathan Taylor, you don't have to. Some interesting pivot options. Dameon Pierce. What do you make of Dameon Pierce this week? We talked kind of extensively about David Montgomery here. Do you think the same thing kind of applies to Pierce? Not in that he's as good. He's a late draft pick this year. He is the number one. Lovie Smith said they wanted to get him the ball more, and they did, in fact, get him the ball a lot more last game with 15 touches for 69 yards in that low-scoring loss to the embarrassing Broncos. But do you think some similar logic applies at $5,000 for Pierce, in that Chicago's offense isn't very good either, and the game script should stay neutral?
Yeah, I like the call on Dameon Pierce as well at 5,000. The price is right. He seems to be their primary back. It took one game for them to decide, we should go to the youngster here. And he, looks like he's a pretty good back. He's not the most talented in the league, but he won that spot. He didn't come into camp the favorite with a lot of draft capital or anything. So he had to win that spot, and he did so. So he's 5,000. We're projecting him at 7.7% ownership. 7.7% chance of being in the optimal lineup. The matchup is great against the Bears, 27th in rush DVOA. So I think that he makes a lot of sense as a fairly low owned pivot. Like we said, I mean, he's not a 1% guy, but 7.7% seems about right for Dameon Pierce, and I'll be going there a fair amount.
All right. You know where I'm going next, and I have to ask you because he's getting 6% ownership. Ben actually was pretty heavy on him yesterday. Miles Sanders against Washington. The Commanders are allowing 7.5 yards per carry through the first two games. Neil, 7.5. And listen, they've allowed 4 rushes for 20 plus yards already. One to DeAndre Swift, one to Travis Etienne, one to James Robinson, one to Amon-Ra St. Brown. They're equal opportunists when it comes to anyone who gets the ball can probably rush for 20 plus yards on them right now. It's been really bad. And Miles Sanders, while I hate the fact that he could get vultured at the goal line anytime, he did have 20 touches last game. How do you think that translates this week as 6.5 point road favorites against Washington?
Yeah, I really like Miles Sanders again this week. I mean, you can say what you will about having to split the touchdowns a little bit. He still gets the king's share of the volume. He's 5,500 in a great matchup with the Commanders. Projecting for only 4.7% ownership with a 6.8% chance of being optimal. I'm going to want to play a lot of Miles Sanders. And he's just a talented rusher. As you said, he breaks off more long runs than anybody in the league. So yeah, I don't care that there is a possibility that, he'll get down at the one and one of his teammates will rush it in for a touchdown instead of him. Sure, I would prefer it for him to be the goal line back as well, but he's a talented enough back that, you're really counting on those long touchdowns anyway to really put up a big score. So I'm going to take some shots on Miles Sanders and bet on the talent there.
I like some of these cheaper guys. I mean, those are the two, but do you have any other maybe lower owned players that are appealing to you? I know your thing, large field tournaments, you're willing to take some shots. Kamara's 2% if he plays. Penny's 4%, but you have Ken Walker back. Swift is 6%, but it looks like Jamal Williams might be the goal line back, even though Swift is literally averaging 10 yards per carry this year. Breece Hall's 1%, Michael Carter 6%. Anybody down there that stands out as a possible option?
Yeah, I think DeAndre Swift is interesting, especially with Amon-Ra St. Brown really breaking out this week. I think a lot of people are going to be going to Amon-Ra St. Brown, which allows you to get DeAndre Swift at kind of reduced ownership, projected for 6% ownership, which actually looks a little bit over-owned in the tools. But this is a game that I kind of like stacking. It's one of the higher totals on the week. So I'll be playing plenty of Vikings and Lions game stacks. And I think DeAndre Swift will be a part of those stacks. 7,200. The price looks pretty good. I like your call out on both of the Jets running backs. They both look kind of interesting. Michael Carter at 6.4% projected ownership, and he's optimal 11.9% of the time. I'm going to be taking some shots on Michael Carter at 5,200. Breece Hall, on the other hand, I think that you could take some shots there as well. It seems like he's likely to take over at some point, right? As the primary back for the Jets.
You would hope.
You would think so.
I thought last week you would definitely see a closer split, and he was efficient with his touches, but he got 27% of snaps to Michael Carter's 61.
Yeah, it has not happened yet, but as a result, getting 1.5% projected ownership, he's 5,300. The price is right. If he does take over, I think he's going to be a beast at some point. So just have to hope that you get the week right where they decide to kind of flip that split.
I'm with you, man. He's going to be good. He's got to be good, right?
Yeah, he's got to be. He's got to be.
Not a great team, but he's got to be good. Anyway, if you're wondering what tool Neil's referencing to with everything there, the optimal lineup score or the optimal percentage, the boom score, it's the boom bust tool. I love it because you're getting ownership in there already. Like, you don't have to open up a million different tabs. You have projections on there, salary, ceiling, bust percentage, boom percentage. You have the ownership percentage. All that is huge, but you got the ownership projections too. The top stack tool, greatest tool ever, really is. Whether it's football, baseball, doesn't matter. Whatever it's hockey, whatever team you're stacking players in, you got the top stack tool, the boom bust tool. All of it's free first 3 days if you're looking to get in there and check it out. I mentioned it at the top. I know some of you guys might not have been here, but if you're here now, first 3 days entirely free. Throw that in chat, Tyler. Every tool we have for Stokastic Plus Platinum NFL package, everything for NFL, 100% free for the first 3 days. We do this because we want you guys to check the tools out. We think you're going to love them. And if you're a hand builder too, usually our tools were geared pretty hard, pretty heavy towards the 150 max, MME guys that are using Cruncher in conjunction with everything else. We have the lineup generator now, which is awesome. You click a button that generates lineups. You can save them. You can discard them. You can generate as many as you want, and still free. You have the player compare tool. So if you're a hand builder and you have a 1v1 or a 2v2, if you don't want to super chat us, and you definitely don't have to, or if you don't think we're going to be able to get to your question, hop over there, input the players, and you're good to go. You'll get the projections, the ownership, and everything on there. 1v1, 2v2, make your life a little bit easier. All right, let's talk wide receivers. Loaded position, Neil. I don't actually know where to start because there are so many good wideouts in week 3.
Yeah, you kind of wonder, as we're talking about this, I'm like, well, is everybody going to pay up at wide receiver this week and then go down to lower dollar running backs? Because that's worked both weeks so far. In general, the high end running backs have largely failed, and the cheaper running backs have done better, and then the expensive wide receivers have been absolutely crushing it. So I wonder if that's going to be the route that everybody goes, and maybe we need to think about flipping the script and playing some more expensive running backs and taking some shots on some of these less expensive wide receivers. But as you say, I mean, the wide receivers just in general look great this week. Stephon Diggs, coming off that absolutely monster game, is going to get some ownership. We're projecting Stephon Diggs for 18.7% ownership, but we still have about a 20.4% chance of booming. That is just nuts. You don't see for a $7,700 player, it's hard to have a 20% chance of booming, but Stephon Diggs has just been getting so much volume. I kind of wonder, do you think that's sustainable? Like, do you think he's going to get the same target share when Gabe Davis is back?
No. week to week, you're going to see, I think definitely you'll see.
Yeah, I think you're right. This was just a spike week, right? I mean, this week is not something, obviously you can't count on what happened this week, but just even the volume, I think this was just kind of an outlier week. And we talked about on the Monday show that the Gabe Davis absence affected the guys who were below Diggs in the pecking order more so than Diggs. At least that was my expectation. And then of course all the volume went to Diggs. So I don't know what to make of that, but yeah, we're obviously not going to see what we saw on Monday very often, but
it was also just wide open.
Yeah. Right.
Which is, a testament to him and Josh Allen finding him. But yeah, like, okay. So just what I was saying is I do think you're going to see games like this, Gabe Davis or not, 10, 11, 12 target games relatively frequently. Last year, you saw 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You saw 8 games with double-digit targets. 1, 2, it's 4 with 13 plus targets. So yeah, probably around maybe a quarter of his game, you're getting those monster target weeks, and half or more, you're getting 10, 11. But I think you'll definitely see a few spots where it's like 6, 7 target games. Ultimately, though, from a target share standpoint, where do you think he settles in at the end of the year among the rest of the league? Like top 3, top 5, top 10?
Probably top 10. And that's a completely uneducated opinion, but I don't think he's going to end up as top 3. I think Josh Allen's probably going to be spreading the ball around a bit more than some of these other offenses. So maybe top 5, top 10. I don't think he's likely to be top 3 because I think Josh Allen's just going to spread the ball around a little bit more than, like Devontae Adams, for example, I think is surely going to get a higher target share than Stephon Diggs. At least would be my expectation. But yeah, I don't know exactly. Do you have an opinion about where he's going to end up?
Yeah, top 10, top 7. Last year, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. He was 8th. But target share can be misleading when you're on a team that throws as much as Buffalo does. Yep. So like if you're just talking about raw targets, yeah, I would think Diggs is top 5 again. Yeah. And that's all we care about, right?
Right. Yeah. It's good enough, especially as you say, on a team that has so much volume passing the ball. It's not really about target share. It's more about raw targets, and he's going to get a lot of raw targets. So yeah, Stephon Diggs, obviously going to look great this week. Justin Jefferson in that matchup with the Lions. I mean, you can't ask for much better matchup. Could have just huge volume, especially after that letdown week this week. We're expecting only 9.1% ownership for Justin Jefferson. If this past week had not happened, you have to think that would be double. Like after his week 1, he looked so unstoppable. And then with Darius Slay covering him, he looked more human in week 2. But I don't think he's human. I think he's superhuman. So I'm going to be going to some Justin Jefferson at 9% projected ownership. He's optimal 12% of the time, despite the 9,300 price tag, and booming 17.9% of the time at a 9,300 price tag is absolutely insane. I tweeted this Sunday, are we getting too cute by not just jamming Cooper Kupp in every one of our lineups every week?
Well, it makes me feel like an idiot every time I don't.
Right? I know.
It really does. I don't know what to make of it anymore. I do. I do. We know what Cooper Kupp does every single week, right? And now he's going up against Arizona. The problem is when you miss out on all those Cooper Kupp weeks over the first couple of weeks of the season, you're like, all right, now I have to fade.
Got to double down now. Yeah.
Yeah. Now you have to. But man, every single week it's 2 touchdowns or 120 yards, 10 receptions and a touchdown. It does. I tweeted a couple of weeks ago in week 1, it wouldn't matter if Devontae Adams was alongside Cooper Kupp. The guy's still getting double-digit targets every game because he's wide open. When you're that open, it's just impossible not to throw to him. So I guess naturally the question for you, Neil, is at 9,900. What is he? He's $600 more expensive than the next closest player on this slate, at least on DraftKings. At $9,900. Is he still a priority? Because we can make it work.
Yeah. So I would say he is a priority for me when I can get him into lineups. So I guess that's not a great answer, because obviously if you can fit in Cooper Kupp at 9,900, yeah, you're going to play Cooper Kupp. So I wouldn't say he is necessarily a priority. He's still going to be in a ton of my lineups. I want to say he can't keep getting away with this, but we've been saying that for a year now, and he keeps getting away with it. He's just that good. He puts up a huge score every week. And now in this matchup with the Cardinals, he's probably going to put up. The question really is, how many points does he really need to get where you absolutely need him? like raw points. And I think that number is probably 35 or 40 fantasy points. Like I think 25 fantasy points at 9,900 isn't a need to have it score. So I think that, 25 fantasy points is certainly a realistic expectation for Cooper Kupp, in which case, yeah, I'd be totally fine to fade him, but he has so many of those, 40-point games too, that it's very likely that Cooper Kupp is somebody that you're going to need this week. So a priority, I wouldn't say he's a priority relative to his ownership. I think the 16% he's getting seems about fair for Cooper Kupp. I haven't made my lineups obviously yet. We'll see how things break down too, because we might have some injury situations make him more optimal, because we'll get some cheaper players that you can play in your lineups depending on how injuries shake out. And if they're, if you can play an Eno Benjamin, for example, or if you can play some cheap guys in your lineup, then sure, Cooper Kupp becomes more of a priority. At this point in the week, I wouldn't call him a priority, but he is a guy that, yeah, if you can fit him in there, he's a number one wide receiver for me pretty easily. So if you have 9,900 left over, I'm not pivoting anywhere else. I'm going to be playing plenty of Cooper Kupp.
And another thing is, as good as Cooper Kupp is every single week, look at the top lineups from the Millie Maker last week. None of them had him.
Yeah, exactly.
None of them had him, because Hill can still go for 45 and Waddle can go for 43 and Amon-Ra St. Brown can go for 42. So as good as Kupp is, there are a lot of other receivers that are less expensive that can still have those insane spike weeks. And we saw that last week. Dude, the guy that came in fourth place had Ramondre Stevenson and Rex Burkhead in a $50,000 lineup. He got 44 from Tua, 22 from Curtis Samuel, 43 from Waddle, 42 from St. Brown, 29 from Andrews, 45 from Tyreek Hill, and 26 from the Bucs defense. Is that crazy or what? That
is absolutely nuts. I'm kicking myself. I was kicking myself on Sunday because I saw the Dolphins going off, and I was like, Alex said the Dolphins were going to, he didn't say they were going to go off. He said that they were one of his favorite stacks. And I remember that. And I was like, I was kind of trying to prioritize the Dolphins and giving them little boosts, but they weren't really a huge it didn't totally click for me that I wanted to play Dolphins. In the back of my head, I was like, okay, I want to have some Dolphin stacks, and I wasn't getting to any naturally. So I gave them boosts and ended up getting, 2 or 3% Dolphin stacks. And I was really kicking myself because, Alex called them his favorite stack and I just did not get there. So, kind of a disappointing week for me that they were a team that I liked, and I still just didn't get there because they weren't a huge priority for me.
He was spot on, man.
He was spot on.
Also kicking myself on our betting show when we were talking about what side we were on with Baltimore and Miami. I kind of took a hard pass on it with the reasoning of, I have no idea what the secondary banged up is going to look like for Baltimore. And my dumbass didn't just parlay that same concern into, stacking Miami.
Right. Exactly. It felt so obvious after we saw it happen that was, within the range of outcomes, at least with that banged up backfield. It kind of escaped me a little bit. Even though we talked about it on multiple shows, we recommended him. As I was building, I was kind of thinking, okay, I want to get some Dolphins. I just didn't prioritize them as much as I should have. Nathan, great. That's kind of the point that I'm making about Kupp. If he gets 25 at 99 at 9.9, it's probably not going to be enough because there are so many other wide receivers, particularly this week. There are so many other wide receivers that look pretty good. So 25 out of Kupp, probably not going to be enough. I think it's, he's actually, I would say it's likely that he outscores. I think he's more likely going to score more than 25 points than less than 25 points, which is kind of nuts to say, but I think it's true at this point with Kupp in this matchup with the Cardinals. So he's obviously a guy that you do want to play. And then Marco Samparo says Burrow with Chase and Higgins is this week's Tua with Waddle and Hill. And yeah, I could see that. Do you like the Bengals stacks this week, Laffy?
If they can figure out even remotely how to protect Joe Burrow, yes, I love him. He's been sacked 13 times in 2 games. That's my only concern. That is really bad.
Yeah.
He's constantly under duress. He's constantly on his ass. Yeah, I would love this deck. Plus, Jamar Chase and T. Higgins are both single-digit ownership right now on our ownership projection. What's Chase at, like 6% or something?
Yeah, he's getting like virtually no ownership, which is pretty insane to me. Currently, the Jets are 32nd in the league in pass DVOA. So it's as good of a spot as you can hope for. And if Chase is going to be getting 6% ownership on any slate, really, you're going to want to be playing Chase at 6% ownership. But in particular, in this matchup with the Jets, Man, yeah, sign me up. I totally agree with that take. Sign me up for some Cincinnati stacks. Jamar Chase, yeah, 5.7% projected ownership, 8.2% chance of booming, and 5.9% chance of being optimal. And then T. Higgins looks even better, 9.3% projected ownership with an 11% chance of booming and a 12.1% chance of being optimal. And then, of course, you can throw Tyler Boyd, Hayden Hurst in those stacks as well. A lot of different ways to stack up these Bengals. I don't think I'll be going to what I refer to as, I know people use this terminology kind of different, but triple stack for me would be 3 receivers from the same team. I don't think I'm going to be doing triple stacks of the Bengals, but I also think that if you were going to do it with any team, they're a team that you could consider doing it.
Yeah. I mean, Hayden Hurst is pretty cheap.
Yeah.
Tyler Boyd just feels like he lacks that upside, but he's also cheap.
Yeah. 5,200.
But yeah, I mean, the 2 teams the Bengals have faced do have good pass rushes. The Dallas Cowboys, Pittsburgh Steelers, both great pass rushes, and TJ Watt was in for a bunch of that game before that pec injury. The Jets pass rush is not going to be as lethal. So maybe that makes a difference. I think it's entirely possible that it does. And if Burrow can stay protected and not brought down 7 times, then yeah, absolutely love it. I love it anyway. Don't get me wrong. I'm just saying, I think the only way it really takes off, and you're talking Miami caliber shit, is if they can protect him. They don't have to protect him perfectly, Neil. Just don't be the worst offensive line in the league right now.
Yeah. And as you said, I mean, it might be, they might look worse because of the defenses they faced. Maybe the Jets are the first team that they're going to be able to exploit. And it wouldn't be surprising to me to see them do a little bit better, at least against the Jets.
I think they should come in and crush the Jets this week. Jets coming off that emotional win, improbable, unlikely, shouldn't have happened. And the Bengals embarrassed again, 0-2.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to go full narrative driven here, but you know what I mean. Anyway,
what do you think of the runbacks there for against Cincinnati? So the Jets, we got Elijah Moore coming in at 1.7% projected ownership, 2.5% chance of booming, 2.3% chance of being optimal. And then we've got Garrett Wilson coming in at 5.2% projected ownership, 2.2% chance of booming, 3.1% chance of being optimal. But we have such a small sample size with Garrett Wilson so far. He had 1 game where he just wasn't involved at all. And then last game he was very involved. So we really don't know what to make of, the ownership might be right, but I'm not sure about the boom odds or the optimal odds. I think we just don't have a big enough sample size yet. Do you like running it back with either of those guys or even Corey Davis?
All right. Let me ask you a question. What do you think the Jets pass play percentage is this year?
Oh man. I don't even have a gauge for what it would be. Pass play percentage for the Jets. I would say probably 60%.
75.
Ooh.
Which is it's nuts. Last year, league average 58%, 58, 59%, right?
Yep.
75%. Unfathomable.
After they just signed Breece Hall, I guess they signed a few good rookies, so not the end of the world to not be using Breece Hall as much as a rusher, but
I mentioned that
makes them interesting.
I mentioned that because as inefficient maybe as Joe Flacco can be, if you're coming out there and you're throwing the ball, he threw 59 times in week 1, 44 times in week 2. If you're coming out there and you're just chucking, well, then you might be looking at Garrett Wilson getting 10 targets again. He got 8 in week 1. He got 12 in week 2. If you're throwing as much as he is, 45 pass attempts, how hard is it to get 10 of 45 targets? Yeah, no,
I think that if I do in my Bengals stacks, I think I will be running it back with a Jets receiver. I think that sometimes I make the choice, like there are some teams that I think I'm not going to run it back, but yeah, with that kind of passing volume, and they are a talented receiving core, I think that I'm probably going to be. And also, I think Joe Burrow is going to be obviously putting up most of his production through the air, and he's going to be, if his production is coming through the air, that probably means that for him to be continuing to throw in the fourth quarter probably means that the Jets are going to need to put up some points as well. So I think I'm probably going to be running it back with one of these receivers in my Bengals stacks as well.
No, I like that. I'll go right back to the well with Amon-Ra St. Brown. I know his price keeps rising, but he is spectacular.
Yeah, I mean, his price keeps rising and his ownership is up to 14.3%, but he does look like a superstar. 10.8% chance of booming, 9% chance of being optimal. And as I said earlier, I do like these game stacks, the Vikings-Lions game stacks. So obviously Amon-Ra St. Brown is going to be a big part of them.
Who would have thought the Vikings-Lions game stack could get so expensive?
I know, right? But we've got some studs here. I mean, we've got pretty condensed offenses with obviously Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen, and then you add in Amon-Ra St. Brown, DeAndre Swift. Yeah, it gets expensive quickly.
Yeah, there's a lot. How tough is it to stack this team? It's probably, if you're running it back with St. Brown, it's obviously doable. But yeah, all right. If you play a cheap defense and you go Cousins, Jefferson, Thielen, Brown, and let's say you just play a $2,400 defense, you have 4,600 per player remaining.
Yeah, it'll be tough. We don't have any like super great options at the low end of the price tier at this point.
That's what I was going to ask you about at wide receiver. Yeah.
Wide receiver cheap options. All right, let me take a look.
Because there's not really much. I think the cheapest you go at running back is Pierce, or if you really want to get crazy and it's a favorite positive or neutral game script, you maybe go Penny and hope that he gets all of because they got scripted out of last game. But yeah, there's not a lot down there at running back.
Yeah. So yeah, among the wide receivers, I mean, we'll have to kind of see how things shake out with Tampa Bay, but I think that's where you're going to find somebody. Russell Gage at 4,700 is going to look great, depending on who's in and who's out for Tampa. And then Rashad Perriman, I think you brought up Scotty Miller on the show yesterday as well. So
25% target share last week.
Scotty Miller, Rashad Perriman, all these guys are going to look pretty good depending on their opportunity this week. And that's just something we're not going to know until closer to game time. But a spot to watch. All these guys look like they could potentially have some opportunities. And then as far as other cheap guys, man, Jacoby Myers looks good in the tools again. He always looks good in the tools. Do you think he has the upside against Pittsburgh?
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. The problem that I have with Jacoby Myers is against Baltimore, by the way. But yeah, the problem is he's a high floor player, but he's such a low ceiling player too. Yeah,
he's tough because he always looks great in the tools because he gets targets and you expect him to break out. And then last year he wasn't scoring any touchdowns, as I recall. He just didn't score any touchdown until late in the year and just didn't put up that many. I've been a sucker for him. I was a sucker for him all of last year. I think I played a good amount this past week as well. And I think you're right, though. He just has not really shown that ceiling. So it's a little bit tough. I'll probably still get there some and just hope that he finally breaks out of it because he's got to at some point, right? I think he's a talented enough receiver at 5,000. The price tag is right. But yeah. I'll have some Jacoby Myers coming in at 11.4% projected ownership, and he's optimal 15.7% of the time. He booms 13.3% of the time in our sims, so he does look pretty good. I mean, that would indicate that we expect him to have some upside. It just hasn't really come to fruition yet. So I think I'll still be going right back to the well, but I'm not going to be doing any 30% Jacoby Myers because he just at some point he's got to show us something.
No doubt. Couple guys that I think are too cheap. They're not dirt cheap. They're just I think too cheap. Michael Thomas, 4% ownership. He's sub 6K. They get a nice matchup. He's been, again, targeted heavily, and he's a touchdown machine. I think he has 3 already through 2 weeks. Mike Williams, if Keenan Allen sits again at 6,700, and of course we have to, pending Justin Herbert's status.
Yep.
Mike Williams at 6,700 is very appealing. And then I'm looking at guys like Treylon Burks is a little too expensive for me, even at 1%. I think if he was around that low 4K range, I'd feel more comfortable with it because this offense has been inept. Marquez Valdes-Scantling, my question to you is, because we never know who it's going to be each week for the Kansas City Chiefs, outside of, for the most part, Travis Kelce, since we don't really know that, should we be looking at the MVSs or the Mecole Hardmans, the guys that are going to be probably sub 5K every week for that exact reason, but have Patrick Mahomes throwing them the football?
Yeah. In large field GPPs, I think absolutely I'm going to be going to that Kansas City well pretty regularly, and it has not worked out for me so far, but I'm going to keep going back to it because I think that I guess that's not true. Week 1, they did look pretty good. I can't think of any receiver who actually had a great week 1. Kansas City put up a lot of points, but it was mostly CEH and then Travis Kelce. So none of these receivers, none of these secondary, tertiary receivers have really done anything yet for Kansas City. But yeah, I'm going to be going right back to the well. I'm going to be playing some MVS coming in at 4% projected ownership at 4,700. Like, that's a great price tag for a guy who, if he puts up 30 fantasy points, I don't think it's going to shock anybody, because if Patrick Mahomes is throwing it from game to game, if it changes game to game, that doesn't mean that MVS can't have spike weeks. I would expect MVS to have some spike weeks. So yeah, I'm definitely going to have some interest there. As far as Mecole Hardman, kind of the same story. I think anytime any of these Kansas City receivers are going to be playable when they're at these price tags and getting this low ownership, coming in at 3.6% projected ownership, 3.1% chance of being optimal at 4,600. I'll take some shots on Mecole Hardman. Sadly, I don't know that I can do the Sky Moore thing anymore. I've been waiting for it to break out, and I probably would if they were on another island game. If this was another showdown, I'd probably take more shots on Sky Moore once again. But on a full slate, I don't know that you really need to be that cute.
He was on the field for 2 snaps last week.
Was it really just 2 snaps? Okay.
2 snaps. Yeah.
Yeah. Then that's getting too cute. He's a rookie. It could change at any moment, but 2 snaps probably isn't going to turn into 40.
Right. Yeah. It could definitely change. But my concern was that it went from 13 in week 1 to 2.
Right. It went backwards.
2.
Yeah.
And not the other way around.
Indication.
Yeah.
Yep.
Tokyo Swan said, Jameis looked terrible with the broken back last week. Yeah. I mean, he got fractures in his back. He didn't look good at all. But somehow in a really, really difficult matchup, maybe the toughest matchup in the league for an opposing passer, he still managed to get 6 for 65 and a touchdown to Michael Thomas. So much more forgiving matchup this week, in my opinion, actually in anyone's opinion, against the Carolina Panthers. Neil, let's talk about tight ends, and then we can move on to our top stacks before we get out of here. 2 things, though. First off, thank you. 100 likes. Just hit it right on the nose. Appreciate you guys. If you haven't done so yet, you know the drill. And subscribe to the channel. If you're a podcast listener, leave a review, a rating. It helps us greatly. Subscribe to the podcast. We appreciate you for that. And check out Prize Picks, man. They're doing $100 first match deposit bonus, which is, free money if you're looking, or if you're into that type of thing. Also, you're not just signing up on a site that sucks, and you're not only doing it because you get the money on the first match deposit bonus. Otherwise, they wouldn't be doing that. They know that people enjoy it, and when they go there, they're probably going to keep playing there. You're building lineups, 2 through 5 players, just straight player props, no juice on either side, overs, unders, no salaries or anything like that. Just building lineups with your favorite player props. And we have the player prop tool over at Stokastic. It's totally free. We have OddsShopper that gives you, help you identify all of the best spots to make sure you hit them over on Prize Picks. And the best thing is, if you're someone, I always say this, like Gajeski or Ben, who knows a lot of different sports that are happening right now, right? From PGA to MMA to college football to NFL, you can mix them all up into a 5-player, 5-prop lineup. So if you can make a lineup of as many sports as you want, obviously 5 or under. And if you hit all 5, whether you're doing one sport or all sports, you 10X your entry, 10X. And unlike traditional books, this is the cool part. You still 2X your entry. If you hit 4 or 5, you still make money back if you do 3 or 5. And if you're doing 4, you could do a power play too, where you do 4, you don't make any money if you only hit 2 or 3, but if you hit 4 or 4, you're 10Xing it. So you're taking on that risk with a lot higher upside. So very cool. Prizepicks.com, or you can download it in the App Store, Google Play Store, but use the link. Tyler, did you throw that link in the chat for me? That link's going in the chat. It's in the description. Make sure to use that if you want to get the first match deposit bonus over at prizepicks.com. All right, tight ends. I haven't seen this many viable tight ends in a long time. And that doesn't mean I'm excited about them, Neil. But I think looking down the list of tight ends, I could probably pick out 8 of them and go, yeah, I could see them being in winning lineups this week.
Yeah, so I'm sorting by ownership right now, and all of the top owned tight ends look under owned according to the Boom Bust tool. We've got Tyler Higbee coming in at 12.4% ownership with a 17.6% chance of booming and a 15.6% chance of being optimal. TJ Hawkinson, 10% ownership, 13% chance of booming, 10.8% chance of being optimal. Throw him in those Vikings game stacks. Mark Andrews, 8.2% projected ownership, 19.9% chance of booming at 6,900 and a 13% chance of being optimal. Dallas Goedert, 7.2% ownership, 9.1% chance of being optimal. Finally, Dawson Knox is a guy who looks over-owned in our tools, but I'm still not going to be full fading Dawson Knox. I still think Dawson Knox has that upside to have a multiple touchdown kind of week. So he's coming in at 7.5% ownership, 3.5% chance of being optimal. I'm still going to want to go there some. One guy that I wanted to bring up, actually, just at the end, as we're talking about wide receivers, came to my mind, Drake London and Kyle Pitts. These are guys that I'm willing to play given just about any week. Kyle Pitts coming in at 3.8% projected ownership at 4,800. I think I'm still willing to take chances on Kyle Pitts. I think he's just too talented for me to not want to take some chances there. What do you think about Kyle Pitts this week? He's let us down so many times. Are you still willing to go back to the well?
Well, I know you're on the same page as Ben with this one. Ben's willing to go back to the well here. 17% target share through the first 2 weeks of the season. He was definitely targeted more frequently in week 1 than he was in week 2. He's going to be on the field a lot. There's obviously going to be growing pains with Mariota at quarterback. Drake London has clearly been a preferred option for Marcus Mariota. Pitts is playing 93 and 84 and then 93% of snaps. So that's encouraging. I do just want to see quickly what his route participation was. I'm assuming it's very, very, very high. So
for Kyle Pitts.
Yeah. So let's see here. It is at, why did they do that?
So he's
so
run
57 routes through 2 games.
Yeah.
Compared to
Drake London at 58
for London. So it's up there. I mean, it is high. I didn't look to see how many dropbacks we saw from Marcus Mariota, but my guess is, not that much more than 58, 69 dropbacks. So, he's up there.
Yeah.
I get it. I get it against Seattle. I have no issues with it. You can't spend the top 5 draft pick on a tight end and then plan on not using him.
Do you have an opinion on who's going to have a better career between Drake London and Kyle Pitts?
No, I have no idea.
I don't either. I have no idea either. I'm curious to hear what other people think.
Yeah, I haven't seen enough from London yet. My assumption is both of them are good. We saw Pitts last year with just a bad offense, not quality blocking and no run game to speak of. He still put up 1,000 yards, albeit in a 17-game season. So, right. It's as a rookie, he can line up anywhere as well, right? You're not just lining him up inside. You can line him up anywhere. I think Kyle Pitts is perfectly fine, but I'd be lying if I said I wasn't a little bit concerned about his first 2 games.
I know, me too. And his rookie season was not, he had a good rookie season for a rookie tight end. Tight ends don't typically have great rookie seasons, but I was kind of hoping for a sophomore leap, and it has not happened yet. People in chat are pointing out that Mike Evans' appeal apparently was denied. Multiple people have said he's officially not playing this week, so we know Mike Evans is out. So yeah, some of those Tampa Bay options, especially if Chris Godwin is out, he's questionable currently. If Chris Godwin is also out, then those guys become even more interesting. But already, Russell Gage is going to look really good with Mike Evans out.
No doubt about it. Just looking last year, though, at Pitts, he had maybe 2, if you're using DraftKings bonus scoring, he had 3 20 fantasy point games in 17 starts.
Yeah, it's not great for a guy who, but his price tag has come down and his ownership has come down to kind of reflect those odds of booming. So, and I think that his odds of booming, I would expect him to have more this year. We haven't seen it yet, obviously, but I'm still holding out hope. So I'm willing to go back there. But yeah, as you said, there are a lot of tight ends that look pretty good this week. There's nobody that's like, man, I want to jam this guy in, but throw Gerald Everett, Hayden Hurst, guys that are just in great passing offenses. Both look like they're going to be a little bit underowned relative to their odds of success. There's just a lot of tight ends that you can play this week, and kind of comes down to what the rest of your lineup looks like. Do they work as a game stack? Does the price work out for the kind of stack you're trying to do? But there's a lot of tight ends I'm going to be mixing and matching in my lineups this week.
I think I have to go back to Irv Smith too, to be completely honest with you.
After that drop?
Yeah, it was bad. It was bad, but he's $3,100. His snap rate went up considerably from week 1 to week 2. Granted, they had to throw a whole lot more in week 2. Targeted 8 times, found the end zone wide open. He got open on that other one down the sideline too. He just dropped it. And I think you'd be hard pressed to not go back to him. I think he's an athletic player. He had a drop. It sucks. It was bad, but I think he's a good pass catcher. And I think if you're just looking at cheap options, you're not getting a lot of good cheap options down there. I can tell you that much for sure. He only ran 14 routes in week 1. In week 2, he ran 30 routes.
Wow. Okay.
So if you're passing a lot, you're looking, 27, probably 30 routes for Irv Smith. I have no problem with that at 3,100, especially since he was targeted on 8 of those 30 routes that he ran.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. Despite my comment about the drop, that's just me being bitter at Irv Smith, but I'm with you. I think that he's certainly playable this week at 3,100. Once again, I like those game stacks. I like those Vikings-Lions game stacks, and obviously Irv Smith can be a part of some of them. So at 3,100, 6.4% projected ownership, I'm with you. I'll be running some Irv Smith out there as well.
Yeah. Atomic Bombmother said, or Adam Bombmother said they've been using the other tight end. Yeah, Johnny Munn. He's ran 36 routes, but in week 2, even though they played similar snaps, Irv Smith still ran 10 more routes than him, which is appealing to me. Was targeted 5 more times. He's a better pass catcher for sure. Yeah. Anything else at tight end you want to hit on?
No, I think we've largely hit on. Obviously, Travis Kelce, you can always play. We didn't mention Travis Kelce coming in only 5.9% ownership. I think you mentioned that earlier in the show that he's getting no ownership, but a 15.6% chance of booming, 9.8% chance of being optimal. I feel like we obligatory mention of Travis Kelce. He's obviously the top tight end on the slate if you can afford him.
Absolutely. All right, let's do it. We're going to finish this one up with top stacks, my favorite segment of the show. Also, if you guys are into betting, the OddsShopper channel's got everything for you. For Thursday Night Football, we already have content coming out. For college football, for baseball, for esports, golf, tennis, everything. Anything you can think of. If you're looking to bet, we got the best content you're going to find out there on YouTube. And we also have the OddsShopper Premium Insider Access. Your first week is entirely free. Link is in the chat. Tyler can throw it into, or links in the description. We can throw it in the chat as well. You're getting all of our picks early, or you're getting picks that we're not putting on YouTube that maybe, we just don't have time to do videos. We're always going to let you know when things are changing, when the odds shift, all of that stuff. First week, entirely free. And say you use a link for me, you're also getting access to Ben and to Greg and Eric and Eitan and all those guys and vice versa. So very cool over there in the Discord. We all have our private channels, but then there's a main channel on top of that. If you want to check it out, first week is free. Check that link out and come hang out with us. We'll have some fun, sweat some bets, and win some money. All right, Neil, top stack percentages. Number 1 is the Bills, then followed by the Rams, Vikings, all 3 of them at 10+%. Then you have the Chiefs, Chargers, Eagles, and Raiders closing out I just threw the top 7 in there for the sake of it.
Sure. Yeah, all those stacks look great. I'm going to play some Buffalo stacks, some Ram stacks. They also look under-owned. The quarterback ownership projection looks low relative to their top stack odds. Minnesota, I've talked about a lot. It's going to be one of my favorite teams to stack on this slate. Kansas City is kind of fun. I feel like they're getting lower ownership because you don't know who to throw in the stack with Patrick Mahomes, but I'm just going to spread it out. I'm probably going to be above the field on Kansas City stacks in general and just kind of mix and match who I am playing in those stacks. And then we talked about them a little bit earlier. They're not in that top 7 that you mentioned, but Cincinnati, I think, is a stack that I'm really going to be targeting a lot this weekend as well. I just really like the matchup with the Jets. I like the narrative of it, of Cincinnati starting slow, finally getting to face a pass defense that's maybe not as good as the defenses they've been facing. Easy to run it back with one of those Jets receivers. So I think a Cincinnati stack is one that I'll throw in there as well.
What do you do with an Eagles team that can rack up a lot of yards, but it's so hard to, if you're going to get the stack right, that's difficult in its own right. And then B, Jalen Hurts has been dominant from a fantasy standpoint, but he's only thrown 1 touchdown this season. So whether it's Devontae Smith or AJ Brown or Dallas Goedert, I certainly don't want to do a ton of double stacks. And the backfield, Miles Sanders probably gets another 17, 20 touches. They'll get some to Gainwell, a few to Scott. Hurts is going to have designed runs. He's going to have chances to run, not just at the goal line, but as we saw, out from 30 yards for a touchdown last game. And the dude's so strong that he can carry 3 defenders in. I just have a tough time really falling in love with any stacking options for Philly.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I think the interesting thing about Philly is so we see Jalen Hurts projected for 7.8% ownership with a 6.2% chance of Philadelphia being the top stack. So looking a little bit over owned from that perspective. But I think that Jalen Hurts' ownership might also get steamed a little bit because people are going to play him without any receiving options because people are willing to. And because he projects so well, he's going to fit really nicely into optimizers for people who are not stacking at all. So I think for me, if I'm playing Jalen Hurts, I'm going to just play him with one pass catcher, most likely. Just make sure that I have some stacking option, and hopefully he does more through the air this week. So yeah, I don't love any of the passing stacks for Philadelphia, but I'm happy to do some Jalen Hurts, AJ Brown stacks. I think he's the clear alpha there. Devontae Smith, the price is right. So I think you can get, I don't know, you're getting different by doing a stack with Jalen Hurts, but I think that you can, eliminate some of that quarterback ownership percentage as being these are guys who are running out with Jalen Hurts without any pass catching options. And I would rather throw him out there with the pass catching options just to, take away one of those spots that you have to worry about with the correlation with Hurts. So I think for me, I'll probably be doing some Hurts single stacks.
For sure. I just don't want to get to double stacks here.
I'm with you.
Yeah, that's all. I'm 100% in agreement that if you're talking, Ken Hurts and AJ Brown, that's why I love single stacks, because there's going to be a lot of games where he does everything he needs to support one wide receiver in a big way, but also does the rest with his legs. And then other pass catchers don't really do much at all. So it's not like you needed to have both of them. So yeah, I'm with you here. Some of the stacks that, and we talked about Minnesota and Detroit. That's obviously a good one. I'm still wavering on whether or not I want to get any Atlanta, but I think I'll probably won't have a ton of that. Cincinnati has a positive leverage score. Some of the worst stacks though, and it's pretty obvious. Green Bay, we have last. As crazy as that sounds, it makes sense.
I hadn't noticed that.
Yeah. What's that?
I had not noticed that Green Bay is so low on the board. Yeah, against Tampa Bay, I guess it does make some sense.
Our rating score has them as 0. But I think also it's just think about the pass catchers. We talk about the Kansas City maybe being lower owned because of the pass catchers. Now you're talking about Sammy Watkins, who, had a big play last game, was involved, but still Sammy Watkins, Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs, if he gets a look at
Randall Cobb.
Yeah. Of course, Alan Lazard, but even Lazard had a nice touchdown last game, was targeted in the red zone, but his overall involvement was pretty limited too. So yeah.
Easy fade. Yep. I'm with you there. And actually you brought up Atlanta. I do just want to say Seattle is 30th in pass DVOA so far this year, which makes me have a little bit of interest in Atlanta just because they're not a super expensive stack. They've got, London and Pitts are obviously very talented. So I might take a few shots on Atlanta.
I was kind of surprised that the Commanders only have a 1% top stack probability with the way that they've played early on.
Yeah, that does surprise me as well. Yeah, 1.3%, 3.3% projected ownership. Man, I was cheering against that stack this week. That got to be so chalky this week. And I don't think Carson Wentz is good. You've watched him more than I have. Do you think Carson Wentz is good?
I think he's made some good plays. I don't think he's particularly good. He's going to make a lot of mistakes. He's always going to make mistakes. That's just how Carson Wentz does things. Like he fumbled last game. Fortunately, they got it back, but he fumbled, which he does all the time because he never sees players coming from the blind side. They call it a blind side for a reason, but his pocket, his awareness, it just isn't there anymore. A lot of quarterbacks are very good at being able to, sense that pressure. He doesn't anymore. He used to. He doesn't anymore. And then he got picked. He has 3 interceptions in 2 games as well. But listen, I think he's the QB2 through the first 2 weeks of the season. Can you imagine that? I think Carson.
No, I was not expecting that.
Sorry, QB3, Neil, but he's right behind Lamar and Josh Allen.
Yeah, I mean that's nuts. And spoiler alert, it's not going to hold. I don't think Carson Wentz is good enough. I don't think this offense. I mean, they're looking a lot better than we were expecting. They might be a lot better than we were expecting, but they're obviously not as good as they have been. They do have a 2.1% chance to be in the top value stack. So even by that metric, they don't look that great. They look a little bit better by value stack odds. But yeah, I'm not high on Washington this week. I don't think I'm going to be going there a lot, especially against Philadelphia, who I think is a good team.
Would you run back a Hurts single stack with a Washington player?
Probably. I think, the Washington receiving options they're talented enough and they're cheap enough that I would probably run it back with one Washington skill player somewhere.
Any other teams you want to get to?
No, I think we've covered all of the main teams that we want to talk about.
All right, then. Hey, Neil's got a video out too, and I believe an article on that. I'm not sure if he did an article on it, but he definitely a video on how he won that 90K. He's had some monster showdown wins. What else you got going on?
Yeah, so I did the video actually beforehand about how I was going to set up Fantasy Cruncher for that slate, and then the social media team put out a short about it, about how look, this is what Neil said he was going to do. This is what Neil did, and it worked out, resulted in $92,000. So that was fun. Tomorrow I'm going to be on a lot of content. Today I'm recording High Stakes in a couple hours, and then I'm doing the deeper dive for MLB, and then tomorrow I'm on all the regular showdown stuff. I'll be doing an article. I'll be doing 2 videos on demand on how I'm setting up my Fantasy Cruncher, and then I'll be back on the deeper dive tomorrow night as well.
Sweet. I got my Thursday night bets out already over on OddsShopper. Got some inside the Discord.
One for each team.
What's that?
One for each team.
Well, Thursday night, if Thursday night football's out, I'm about to do the one for each game.
Okay.
Our picks for every game coming up after this. It'll be released tonight. It is a hellish task, Neil, but we're here for it.
Yep.
We
I'm sure it is, but you do a good job of it. So that's why they keep making you do it. You got to stop doing such a good job.
Yeah. They don't make me. I offered to do this one.
Okay.
Stupid. Anyway, appreciate you guys. Thanks for hanging out as always and supporting the channel. Follow Neil at PlayerQDFS, me at Lafayette_D. Shout out to Tyler Zander, doing a great job producing as always. And we'll catch you back here for the next one. Peace.